From fall
Today, it was simply gorgeous yet again.
to winter,
This is just a little too early.
Midwest weather can change in a snap.
1 week we're raking leaves, the next week we're shoveling snow.
Some people love it. Others, maybe not so much.
It's really cold. It's kind of numbing out here.
Either way, it's our job to make sure you and your family are prepared for everything Mother Nature throws at you.
Our expert team of meteorologists understand the impact that snow, ice, and bitterly cold winds have on your daily plans, from tough commutes to school closures and keeping your furry family members safe.
There are steps you can take to make sure you're prepared for the winter months ahead. The 3 News Now Weather Alert team has the tips and tools you'll need to be storm ready now. I'm Weather Alert Chief Meteorologist Jennifer Zeppelin. We're talking about winter storm readiness.
And on 3 News Now, meteorologist Mark Stitz. We'll be covering topics like the difference between an advisory and a warning. Of course, have our team's winter forecast and advice on getting your car ready so you can be prepared for whatever winter throws at us.
Now, before we get to this year's winter forecast, let's take a look back at last winter. If you're a snow lover, you probably were not disappointed.
On average, the first accumulating snow in Omaha is in the middle of November. But last year, we saw our first accumulating snow on October 14th, which brought more than 1 inch across the city. That would be the beginning of a very snowy winter, with things going into high gear in February. Omaha's Epley Airfield measured 27 inches of snow in just that month, making it the snowiest February on record.
Now, those records go all the way back to the 1880s, and we beat the old record from 1965 by about 1.5 inches. Helping to push us into the record books was a blizzard that hit the weekend of February 23rd.
That storm dumped 7.5 inches of fresh snow on the airport, with even higher totals reported across the city. Road crews battled the snow all weekend, but Omaha Public Schools stayed closed the following Monday.
And even with February's record snow, the year's snow total did not reach the top 5 list. Omaha would have needed more than 56 inches for that. But we did break into the top 10 list, finishing 7th place with just under 53 inches.
And unlike some years, the high snow totals were fairly widespread across the metro and surrounding areas. Nearby Valley picked up about 51 inches, while Lincoln beat out the other region's official snow recording sites with 55.5 inches. Norfolk was a little bit lower, coming in at 29 inches last season. But of course, all that snow was a shock to our systems after what seemed like a recent snow drought. The previous 2 winters only brought us about 17 inches and 11 inches respectively.
Yeah, the winter of 2015-16 was at least closer to our average, coming in at just over 2 feet. But the year before was also dry with about half of that.
And just like last year, it seems we are getting an early start to this year's snow season.
Yeah, the winter doesn't officially begin until December 21st, but Omaha had its first measurable snow on October 28th, with Epley Airfield seeing about 1/2 inch on the grassy areas. And while the snow melted as soon as it landed on the roads, those wet roads froze up overnight, forcing part of I-680 to close until crews could melt the ice. Now, winter brings a variety of precipitation, and it's all decided by the air temperatures at the ground and in the clouds. Now, when rain falls through the relatively warm air, it reaches the ground as rain. For freezing rain to form, there must be a layer of cold air near the ground that allows the precipitation to reach the ground as rain, but freezes it into ice when temperatures are below freezing.
Now, if that layer of cold air is larger, the rain has time to freeze into small ice pellets called sleet before reaching the ground. For snow to reach the ground, the entire path must be below freezing.
Now, to make sure that you know what type of winter weather is moving in and what the travel impacts will be, the National Weather Service will issue a variety of winter weather products.
A winter weather advisory will be issued when fairly small amounts of wintry precipitation could make for difficult travel.
Now, during a winter storm warning, travel should be avoided with larger amounts of snow or freezing rain expected.
But when it comes to a blizzard warning, travel will likely be impossible due to the high winds, snow, and whiteout conditions.
Now, while some animals are built to handle cold winter temperatures, we will eventually reach a point where it's too cold for most pets to stay outside safely.
Meteorologist Audra Moore joins us now with some tips on what your pets and livestock need to make it through the season.
During the cold winter months, we try to stay warm and dry. Our pets need to stay warm and dry too. Not all animals can be inside all the time, so Nebraska Humane Society spokesperson Pam Weiss wants you to know what those pets need.
Animals that spend a lot of time outside in cold weather really need proper shelter. They need proper food, water, and shelter in order to be able to be comfortable.
The shelter needs to be large enough that the pet has enough space to go in, turn around, and lay down comfortably, but not too large. It should also have materials to make the pet comfortable while keeping in the heat. Organic material, like straw, is the best. Blankets, on the other hand, should be avoided.
If you put a blanket in there and he gets in, he's warm, his body heats up, the inside of the doghouse is what should happen. Water can, melt off of him, snow can melt off of him. It gets on the blanket, it freezes.
But once the temperature hits 20 degrees or below, all pets need to come inside if possible.
Many of us know the common sense ways to keep our pets safe during the winter months, but what some people don't know is what livestock owners have to do to get their animals prepared for the winter weather.
Monty Stauffer is with the UNL Extension Office. He says livestock need 4 main things to take on the winter weather.
Make sure they have water. Make sure that they'll have hay, that you can always get to the hay, especially if you have a snowstorm, that you have some shelter for them, keep them out of the wind. And the other thing is just make sure they're healthy going into the winter.
Livestock are pretty tough. As long as they can get out of the wind, they can handle most of what Mother Nature sends their way. And you don't need to worry the next time you see some horses or cattle standing out in the snow.
Now I've seen my horses that stand out when there's snow on top of their backs, and they're doing fine because they've got a thick hair coat. That snow can stay on that hair coat for a while because they've got good insulation.
For more information about keeping your animals safe in the winter, you can always contact the Nebraska Humane Society or your local extension office.
Now, even for people who don't like snow, it's usually a welcome sight to most of us on Christmas Day.
Including me. Different people have different standards, though, for what a white Christmas is, but here's how often a few of those happen. On average, Omaha wakes up to at least an inch of snow on the ground Christmas morning once every 3 years. That's just about how often snow is recorded falling on Christmas Day as well.
Now, but for that snow to really pile up to 1/10 of an inch or more Christmas Day doesn't happen very much, only about 15% of the time.
With so many people, though, traveling on Christmas Day, too much snow can be an issue. And 1941 holds the record for most snow falling on December 25th with 6 inches. More recently, though, we had just under 6 inches back in 2009.
Now, we've already seen some snow this fall, but what will the winter hold for us this year?
We'll give you an idea of how much snow and cold we're expecting this year in our Weather Alert team forecast coming up.
Storm Ready Now continues with the 3 News Now Weather Alert team.
If you search online for a winter forecast, you'll find a variety of predictions from a variety of groups. Before we get to our forecast, let's look at a couple of other popular sources.
NOAA, who is the parent group of the National Weather Service, puts out seasonable probability maps for both temperature and precipitation.
NOAA has the highest chance for warmer than average weather this winter in the west, most of the south, and even up in the New England states, but that does not include much of the Heartland region.
Now for precipitation, NOAA gives the highest chance for a wetter than average winter across the Midwest, but does not say how much of that would fall as snow.
As colder temperatures arrive, people have been speculating since fall began what this winter will bring.
Some turn to a source with 2 centuries of weather predictions, hoping to learn what to expect. Meteorologist Audra Moore spoke to the editor of the Farmer's Almanac, and if you hate winter, you may not want to hear what he expects.
If you enjoy reading the Farmer's Almanac, by now you've likely pored over the 2020 edition that contains their winter outlook. What many don't know is the process to put it all together. Take a look. Editor of the 2020 Farmer's Almanac, Peter Geiger, explains how they come up with the forecast.
We use a mathematical formula that was developed in the early 1800s, and we've been doing it now for 200 years, and only 7 people have been doing it over the 200 years.
As for what exactly goes into the formula,
the formula is applied to sunspot activity, planet positions, the effect that the moon has on the Earth, And that has allowed us to do our weather 2 years in advance.
1 year after a long winter with brutal temps and snowfall into March, the Farmer's Almanac says 2020 may not be much better. Their forecast shows 2/3 of the country facing a winter colder than normal, with the worst of it toward the end of January. And they say the Midwest is slated for above average snow yet again. You've heard what the National Weather Service and the Farmer's Almanac are predicting. Here's our forecast.
After a record cold and unusually snowy winter season last year with over 50 inches of snow, it hasn't been a surprise to either one of us that we've been getting a lot of questions about what we can expect to see this upcoming winter season.
Yeah, over the recent snow drought before last winter, a lot of people were really hoping for a big snow season, and we finally got it last year. So now some of you thinking, okay, let's tone it back a little bit for this winter season. So let's talk about what we are expecting. Now, when we look at a long-term forecast, we have to look at the big picture sometimes. And you've all heard the terms El Nino, La Nina. That's when we look at the water temperatures over the parts of the Pacific Ocean along the equator. And right now in that red box, we're seeing temperatures in the blue and yellow coloring. That means we're very close to average for this time of year. And that puts us more in a neutral or La Nada setup, not El Nino and not La Nina.
Except there is some signs that maybe we might shift it back to just a weak El Nino over the next couple of months. But we'll have to wait and see how that all plays out. Now, as far as the overall typical setup for a La Nada event is that we get this colder air surges come out of the Arctic and drops down just right over parts of Nebraska, Iowa, and the Great Lakes region, even across the Northeast, where that warmer setup, the warmer temperatures further to the south, and that's where you could see a little higher chances maybe for ice and possibly some rain and even some severe storms from time to time.
Yeah, and obviously that pattern fluctuated a little bit throughout the winter, but that's what we typically see on average over the winter season in that kind of setup. Now, as far as snow totals in a La Nada, well, we looked at some of the more similar La Nadas to what we've seen so far this late fall and into the winter, and this is what the numbers that we pulled up. The most recent similar La Nada event was back in 2003 in the 04 season. That gave us about 48 inches of snow, so pretty big snow season there, but you can see other similar ones like 1960 and 1993, we came in below average. So there's no real clear signal in a La Nada setup, even as similar to this one, that we're going to see a huge snow or a very low snow total.
And that's really what does make forecasting for this upcoming winter season a little bit more challenging. But we've already seen at least some Arctic outbreaks as we've been in October, and a really big one came through in November. And here's a look at that. You can see the purple colors moving and pooling out of the Arctic Ocean, and then they just plunge to the south, impacting areas even as far south as Mexico.
Yeah, and obviously it's winter. We're going to get cold snaps, but those are the truly cold snaps and already dropped us into the single digits early in November. Now, as far as a typical year or winter for us here in Omaha, these are the average snowfall totals over the last 30 years or so. October, November come in pretty light as far as snow totals, but the main part of winter, December, January, and February, each of those 3 months, we average just over 6 inches of total accumulation. And obviously, as we start to warm up heading into spring, March and April, those snowfall totals start to come down.
So this is our current thinking. We're going to take it month by month, at least our winter months. In December, we're looking at above average snowfall, which would mean more than 6 inches of snow. Temperatures expected on average to be below, so colder than average as we head into December.
Now heading into January, we still are thinking above average snow, so again over 6 inches for that month, but temperatures we think could come in a little bit closer to average, but obviously it's January, it's going to be cold.
And maybe if it moderates a little bit, but it just really all depends right now on how much snow we get both of those months in December and January, and what kind of impact it's going to have on temperatures. Right now, we're sort of leaning in the direction of above average temperatures at this point and below average on our snowfall.
Yeah, get too much snow on the ground though across the region, that can really lock in the cold air, so that could change things as we go towards the end of winter. So here are the 3 big things we're looking at so far for this forecast. So far in the fall, at least, we came in pretty close to what we saw last fall. A couple Arctic outbreaks very early in the season, also a couple small snows very early in the season.
Exactly, and as we mentioned earlier, the wild card out of all of this is really going to be El Nino. Will we see a little bit more warming taking place as we get into the next couple of months or the heart of winter? And if that happens, that might increase our chances for even more snow.
Yeah, and in a weak El Nino, though, again, still a wild card in itself because we can get really small totals for a weak El Nino or really big totals as well.
very similar to what we had this past
Yes.
winter season. And the unsettled pattern, we've already talked about this. We've already experienced it throughout the month of November and even in October. Those cold Arctic surges of air that will be impacting us. Multiple is what we're thinking at this point.
Yeah, and that would put us below average for temperatures, so a colder than typical winter overall.
And when it comes to the snow, we're thinking above average, but nothing like what we saw last year. Our average snowfall runs at about 27 inches, and this year we're thinking about 6 to maybe 10 inches above that.
Yeah, and that would put us around that range of 33 to 37.
Well, we know that there might be some, changes in our winter forecast, and to provide you with the latest updates, we'll continue to keep monitoring it throughout the winter months. Now, whatever the winter brings, you'll want to be prepared with all the proper winter gear. For a typical cold day, you'll need things like a warm hat, gloves, and waterproof boots.
But for the extreme cold, add a face mask and have at least 3 layers under your coat. Coming up, we'll have more safety tips to get you through another cold winter.
Storm Ready Now continues with the 3 News Now Weather Alert Team.
But before you even hit the road, the dangers of winter can start to cause you problems.
According to research by the U.S. Nationwide Children's Hospital, about 100 people die every year shoveling snow in the United States. To better protect yourself, stretch before heading outside, dress appropriately, and shovel throughout the snowstorm so it doesn't become too much to handle. With heavy, wet snow, it can push off your driveway. Don't lift it up. Take breaks as needed and keep your cell phone nearby in case you need to call for help. And one way to prevent needing to make that call for help is by staying hydrated.
Often people don't realize that they're thirsty or dehydrated or whatnot when they're working outside because it's cold, right? And so they're like, well, I'm not hot and sweaty, so they're not taking in a lot of fluids, and you can get into just as much trouble in the winter months as you would in the summer months.
And don't just think about staying hydrated while on break. Drink plenty of water earlier in the day, too.
Even playing outside in the cold too long can be dangerous if you're not dressed properly.
Exposed skin, such as ears, fingers, are common targets for frostbite, which happens when the skin freezes.
You may start to notice your skin turning red or pale, becoming numb, and eventually losing feeling. If you think you have frostbite, doctors say you should go inside and take off any wet clothing.
Avoid immersing, your hands or things like that into very hot water. If you are going to do something like that, not just a kind of a tepid warm water, because otherwise you can get some further injury, a burn type injury from doing that.
And while frostbite affects parts of your body, it's also possible for your internal body temperature to drop too low, causing hypothermia. Early symptoms may include shivering, followed by dizziness, confusion, and problems talking. These warning signs can start in a matter of minutes, not hours.
Especially when, in the previous years we've seen some pretty nasty wind chills, negative 20, negative 30. Time out in that kind of weather without proper clothing on, frostbite and hypothermia can set in within 5, 10, 15 minutes, depending on how bad it is.
And if your body temperature falls just a few degrees, get medical help immediately.
You'll also want to have some extra supplies ready for your car in case old man winter hits when you're on the road.
Meteorologist Mark Stitz breaks down what your car needs to be storm ready now.
Traveling in winter can be dangerous, but there are steps you can take to increase your chances for a safe trip. Getting your car ready starts with a trip to your mechanic to check under the hood. Get your fluids topped off and have your antifreeze checked.
In this area, you want to make sure that the antifreeze tests to negative 30 below.
But you won't even get started without a good charge. If your battery is 4 years or older, get it tested.
The last thing anybody wants is to be out someplace, it's snowing, and all of a sudden the car doesn't start.
And with slippery roads, you'll want to get your tire tread measured.
We want to make sure that they're wearing properly, so there's no excessive edge wear, nothing that would be a red flag.
Make sure people can see you by checking your lights and signals, and make sure you can see them.
Definitely make sure that your wiper blades are in good condition so they're not streaking, because obviously when you get like snow or rain, that could be a visibility problem.
Now that a mechanic has your car ready, it's up to you to do the rest. Start by throwing some bottled water and snacks in the car in case you get stranded.
And then also things for added traction, such as a small bag of sand. Some people say a bag of kitty litter will even work.
But that won't always get you moving. Have a blanket and extra warm clothing with you.
particularly things like mittens and gloves, warm socks, a really warm hat.
Don't forget jumper cables, a phone charger, and a snow and ice scraper. And even on a fairly quiet winter day, roads are rarely in perfect condition as you travel from point A to point B. So, Nebraska State Patrol says when roads are snowy or icy, drivers need to slow down and leave more space between themselves and the driver in front of them. And if you unexpectedly hit a patch of black ice, don't make any sudden movements.
Basically, if you start to slide or you start to go into a skid, take your foot off the accelerator, take your foot off the brake, and just try to let the vehicle straighten itself out. The car wants to go straight. It's a lot of time the input that we give it that doesn't allow that to happen.
And as always, Lieutenant Sutter says to use your seatbelt and always drive sober. Jen and Audra, back to you.
Well, potholes are unavoidable on every level during the winter months.
Both in the way that you can't seem to swerve and miss every single one, and because the perfect conditions to make a pothole are going to continue. Winter here is cold and snowy. That's just how it is, and we all know to expect it. But it's those two ingredients that start to cause problems. Moisture makes it through cracks in the asphalt, it gets down to the subbase, and then things start to get messy.
And so what happens is the moisture gets into a crack in the asphalt, and then we get that freeze at night. The water expands, it kind of hollows that out a little bit as it expands. Once it warms back up, the pavement sinks a little bit, and then it just goes back over, and then we end up with a pothole.
Larger volumes of traffic and heavier vehicles also add to the weight put onto the roads during the winter months when the asphalt is under extra stress. The city and contractors fixing potholes during the winter use a different mixture than the usual.
It's a mix of the rock and the asphalt adhesive, but it's stickier and it's only a temporary solution.
The permanent fixes have to wait until there's less moisture and temperature swings start to calm down. And preventative measures to fill cracks can begin once we get into the spring, summer, and fall months, but for now, we'll just have to deal with the potholes and their temporary fixes.
Well, according to AAA, potholes can cause $15 billion in vehicle damage in the country every year. Here in Omaha, city crews only stop patching them when there's snow to plow. And you can report potholes through the city's app or by calling the mayor's hotline number, which is at the bottom of your screen.
We do try to find them proactively, but with a number of them, it obviously helps to get reports that come in to help us to find them.
Street maintenance engineer Austin Rouser says they get more than 100 service requests each week in the summer, but that jumps to about 4,000 each week by late winter.
And we want your help this winter.
Coming up, we'll tell you how you can give us updates from your city. Snow totals can vary from one county to the next, and we can't be everywhere at once.
Grab a ruler and let us know how much snow fell at your house. Snap a picture of what you see.
But before snapping that picture, don't forget to turn your phone onto its side so it fits better on TV. You can email those pictures to us at pics@3newsnow.com.
Thanks for joining the Weather Alert team. We hope all these winter safety tips will make you storm ready now.